We did it! I am super pumped. Let me explain. Can you see that? Is it backwards? I don't know, but anyways. This week we hit 50 subscribers on the Thunkable X YouTube channel. Like, awesome. I've been going at this for about 2 months now, making videos, and it is so encouraging to have 50 plus of you to join me and say, hey, you really like my content. So to you, I want to say thank you. And I also want to give you this video. This video is dedicated to you, who will always be my first subscribers. So I present to you 50 tips. Alrighty, let's jump into it. So if you are looking for an app idea, the first place I always direct people is to the Thunkable public gallery. This is where you can see apps that other people are working on. You can also check out top community projects. Here you can view the apps, clone the apps, remix the apps that others are making. And if you click this play button, it will actually show the app on your Thunkable Live app. However, once you get an idea of what other people are doing, it's good to put your own spin on them. So if you are looking for your own app idea, ask yourself the question, what is something that frustrates me? All great products, apps, inventions are born to solve problems. Now for buttons. One of the first things I always do is add a little bit of corner radius to them. Originally, the button is square with square corners, but if you come to the properties, scroll all the way down to corner radius, you can make the corners curved. Another pro tip I would share, in one of my apps, I needed the user to be able to click on an image. So instead of adding an image component, I simply added a button and set the background picture to that image, and then made sure that the text was empty. This is how you make a clickable image. You can change the font of any label by clicking on that label, going to the advanced properties, and under text style, adding a font family. A full list of fonts can be found at this article, which I will link in the description. But before you change your font family, one of the things that I typically do is just change the font weight. I like to use 300. I like the very thin, slim text. Now when it comes to input fields, I've found a few cool features in the advanced properties. Under styling, you can change the border of the input field. So what I have found I like to do is give the bottom border a width and a color. So this will give your input field an underline, which helps the user see that that field needs to be populated. At the very bottom, you can adjust the actual keyboard that the app is using. So you can adjust the keyboard type to specifically enter an email address, a numeric number into the input field, and so on and so forth. Another feature to change is the appearance. So if you want to give the keyboard a dark theme to match your app, you can do that here. Now when it comes to actually coloring your app, I love that Thunkable allows you to enter both the hex code of a color and the RGB value of a color. I find myself a lot in online coding having to translate these back and forth through a color code transverter. Another cool feature is actually giving the color or the object some transparency. So you can use the slider to actually make the object see-through so you can see through it. If you need to make the object fully transparent, you can choose this option here. Now when you are designing your app, giving it some color, I like to use Peloton.com. This is a place that will use some logic and an engine in the background to give you colors that will be nice and pretty for your users. You can use these different options at the top here to kind of adjust what the color scheme will be for your app. Now, I've shown this in some other videos, but if you need to actually add some visual elements to your app, say a picture or an icon, you can do that through some free resources. So if you want to add an icon, I like icons8.com. They allow you to search for icons and then choose what style of icon you want to use. So if you're adding multiple different icons, you would probably want to use icons in the same family. When working with images, I like to use canva.com. I've used this a few times in some of my design tutorials, but what this allows you to do is kind of design your own graphics. And then lastly, if you're doing any or you need any kind of animation, lottifiles.com is a place where you can find free animations. And so you would just download that here and then upload that as a resource in your app. And then inside of Thunkable, drag and drop in an animation component and then set the image to that JSON file that you downloaded. Now moving right along to layout, there's a lot to talk about here. So let's go ahead and jump into it. If you want two elements to be side by side, put them inside of a row component so that they are in a row. Now similarly, if you need them to be on top of each other and they are not because they are in a row, you can add a column and this will put the items on top of each other. Whether in a row or a column, you can adjust the spacing within those components by adjusting the justification. And in the same vein as justification, you can adjust the alignment to adjust where they appear inside of that component. Under the Advanced tab of a lot of components, you'll find a spacings drawer. Here, you can adjust the margin to add spacing around an element. Or you can add padding to adjust the spacing within an element. When defining a specific height or width, I always advise using percentages instead of absolute size or pixels. And this is because you want your app to be responsive so that it will show nicely on multiple different devices. People will be viewing your app on different types of phones, and so they will be displaying them in different pixels, and so using percentages is always a better option. Now another nice tip for adding spacing between components is using columns or rows to add that spacing. So you can add it in there and then define a specific width or height to suit your needs. Another tip here, if you want some additional spacing at the top or the bottom or really anywhere in your app, you can add a row or a column just as before, and then give that element a spacing of 1%. And what that does is basically give you some more spacing at the top or wherever you add it. Now, I've had a few questions about the navigators, and personally, I like just using the old-fashioned buttoned and navigate to block instead of the navigators. So in this app, I've just added a button here, and then in my blocks tab, I've added a block that says when that button is clicked, navigate to start screen. One thing I think we can all approve on is screen utilization. If you are creating the same screen multiple times, the same elements, the same visuals, consider doing something like this. You can use the visible property to make something not visible. You can adjust this dynamically based on some other variable. So if you come to a page through route A, you can display object A. And then if you come through another route, you can display object B. Now this is a property in the blocks as well. So I wanted to adjust row, I could then adjust the visible property here. I can set visible to true or false. If you are displaying text in your app and you're creating multiple screens to display that text, consider storing all of that text in one variable with a few objects in it. That's what I'm doing here. Depending on where I'm at in my app, I'm generating a certain ID, and then from that ID or that variable, I'm pulling an object. So here I would pull this object, and then in another case, I would pull this object. So you could add in certain text for the different objects, then call those objects based on other variables. This would allow you to have one screen and then a function that would call a certain object based on some other parameter. Now, if you need to use a block multiple times, you can right-click on that block and click duplicate. This will create a duplicate of that block that you can then adjust for whatever you need. Now, if there are chunks of blocks that you need to duplicate, don't get frustrated that you can't duplicate it here, for it's only doing what you tell it to do. When you right-click on this block, it is indeed duplicating that block. So if there are chunks, stick those inside of an if statement, a function, or some other button click statement. Duplicate that whole thing, then pull out the group of blocks that you want, and then chunk the container that you duplicated as well, and then you have a full duplicated list of blocks. If you are sharing some code with others, you might want to add comments, or even if you want to know what this is doing when you look back at this code in a year, you can add comments by right-clicking on a block and then clicking Add Comment. This will allow you to add your comment here. That way you can come back and see what you did. Now, once your app starts to get complex, you have a lot of blocks like I do on some other of my more complex apps, you might find yourself wanting to focus in on a certain block. And so when that comes into play for me, I like to right-click and collapse block on all of my other blocks. So this will add them or transform them into one line, and then I can focus on the one block that I want to see. If your blocks get a little messy, as they may, because life happens, you can right-click on the canvas here and select Clean Up Blocks. This will put all of your blocks in a clean line. And then if you're ever down the screen and doing things over here, playing around, you can always go to the center of your blocks by clicking this little pointer navigator icon. This will bring you back to center. Now, when you have an app with multiple pages and a list of 20 plus variables, I like to prefix all of my variables with the page that they are on. So all these variables are on Learn module, so these all start with an LM. So if I'm changing these variables on, say, the Calculate tab, I know that that variable's home is on the Learn module page. And similarly, you will see here that these variables on the Calculate tab start with a C. Also, when naming your variables, try to name them with what they are. So give them some context, but then also kind of say what actual data type they are. So here, this is not perfect, but here, this is a flag. It's either going to be true or false. That is often called a flag in coding. This one down here, random number string. So this is different from random number. This is actually the string version of that number. So say you're doing a count or a percent, name your variables with what they are. This helps you when you're coding. Now, I had an issue at one point in time where I wanted to convert a string to a number. So here, this is a number, but I can't put it in this math block. So what I did was first put that string in a variable, and then from that variable, put the variable in that math block, and then it allowed me to convert that string and then round it using this math block. So converting a string to a number, you use a variable. Another tip, if you need to actually store a variable, so say a user's progress in the app, so it's going to stay the same whenever they close the app and return next time, change the variable from app to stored. This is one way to do just that. Now, anytime you find yourself doing something over and over again that looks pretty repetitive, there's probably a better way to do it. Ask yourself, is there any way I can turn this into a function or a loop? In this case, I'll use the count with I from blank to blank by blank block. So for this, I'll put this back in the when screen starts function. I'll count from 0 to 9 by 1. And then I will update from set text label 2. So instead of 0, I'll pull in I, and I can grab this from the variables. So a much cleaner and quicker way to code this. When working with functions, instead of adding a new variable to do something within that function, consider this. Get rid of the variable and get rid of everything else related to the variable, so you just have your text. Change the function to have an input. And so now the function, when you call it, will have a place for you to input a text value. And then within the function, you can grab the variable of whatever you defined that input to be. So we got rid of at least 2 blocks when doing that. Again, a simple tweak, but a lot cleaner code. Now, whenever you finish a big section or milestone in your app, I would encourage you to go ahead and make a copy. This will make a copy, so it would serve as kind of like a backup in case something crazy happens or if you ever want to fall back on something else. Another cool option is you are permitted to actually download one of your Thunkable apps on one device so that you can test it and use it outside of the Thunkable Test Live app. So you do this up here in the top, you click download iOS or download Android. This will then send you an email. You click on that link and it will download your app on your device. But before you do that, be sure in your design, go to your app properties and you can upload your very own icon to your app. So use a website like canva.com that I showed you earlier, and you can create your own icon and upload it here, and that will actually show on your app. Now, if you're wanting to learn more about Thunkable, I would highly encourage you to dive in head first and start coding something on your own. Whether it be by following a tutorial or just trying things out, I would encourage you to just do it. You will learn more by doing than by just copying someone else's app. But on the flip side of that, I would encourage you to check out how others are actually coding their apps. This will give you an idea of better ways to block things and best practices. Whenever you're thinking through a problem, I always encourage you, or if you're having trouble, I would encourage you to actually write down what you are trying to do. So write down, I want to do this and then do this and so on and so forth. And then divide that up into individual steps. So anything you're trying to do with code can be divided into individual steps. Once you have those steps, then try tackling them one step at a time. So in this way, you're breaking it down into feasible steps. Now, if you have questions about the capabilities of Thunkable, consider going to the documentation. This can be found at docs.thunkable.com. And we are specifically looking at Thunkable cross-platform. So here you'll find everything that Thunkable has documented on working through things in the app. If you can't find it there, consider visiting the Thunkable community. One of the great things about Thunkable is this community indeed. You can search for posts or topics by other users, and you will usually find an answer, that day, definitely. If you're looking for tutorials, there are a few options for you. Within the Thunkable interface, you can click this sidebar here, and these are Thunkable's Hour of Code tutorials. You can click on any of these and it will walk you through how to create some of these apps. And then I'm pretty sure Thunkable has some videos actually paired with these on their YouTube channel. So if you go to youtube.com, which you are on right now, and then search for Thunkable, there you go. This is Thunkable's YouTube channel. And then looking through some of their videos, A lot of these are their hour of code videos. So they have their own tutorials. But my friend, you are watching the Thunkable X Tutorials YouTube channel. So I would highly encourage you to subscribe to this channel. That's going to be my last tip, because I am coming out with awesome tutorials for you every week. And that, my friends, will wrap up the 50 tips for my first 50 subscribers. Thanks for watching.